I promise some picks here. We're at week 0. We don't have to talk hypothetically. You don't have to tie your money up for an entire season. You get immediate action. Let's start with a game that I have circled because I really believe, and I am banking on a low-scoring, defensive-minded battle between North Texas and our favorite Miners, the UTEP, Texas El Paso, Texas Western, whatever you want to call them. This is a team that I love to hitch my wagon to because I know exactly the brand of football that they want to play. The Miner defense returned 7 starters from a Bradley Dale Pavito unit that finished 35th in total defense last season, just their second top 40 finish in the last 15 years in El Paso. Led by Praise Amal Away, a DN with 13 tackles for loss last year, absolute monster of a human being. And when you look at their front 6, the way that it's constructed, all of those are returning starters. They also bring back their nickel back. This was a defense that really excelled at getting off of the field, 12th in third down conversion defense last season. And they're up against a North Texas team that clearly has a set identity. They want to run the football, but I'll get to that in a moment. When I look on the other side of the ball for UTEP, the offense completely loses its pop because it was one player, and it was Jacob Cowing, Mr. Big Play for the Miners. He is off to Arizona. So where did those big plays come from? Otherwise, when you look at their offense, it's Ronald Awatt, it's Deion Hankins. They want to run the ball a lot. And those guys aren't the kind of 20, 30-yard chunk runners. They want to move the chains. They want to play field position. So when I flip it over, you look at a North Texas team, couldn't have been more focused on the run. Outside of the service academies, this was like the running team in all of college football last year. 5th nationally in yards per game on the ground, but 42nd in yards per carry. Another team that doesn't do it in chunk plays on the ground. And that's when they had DeAndre Torrey. He's gone now. So when you look at what they're trying to accomplish here with Ragsdale and Adaye, I'm not sure they're going to be able to replicate the same kind of magic. And to look at this number, 55.5, my projections for this is 47.5. So a ton of point value here. I'm going to go ahead and jump in. I would play it all the way down to 53. I think the market's starting to bang it down a little bit. And in the offseason, if you asked me 2 months ago, I would say, all right, they're bringing in Grant Gunnell. You know, he's been a transfer who's been all over the map, but he's got a big arm. Maybe he changes things for them a little bit. Instead, they stick with Austin Ani. We know what he is. 9 touchdowns, 9 interceptions last year. Yes, they have 4 starters returning on the offensive line, but they are breaking in at least 3 new skill position players. So I just don't see this at all. I think this is a gift from the gambling gods to start the season. I know no one's excited to say, I haven't bet on college football in 8.5 months. So I'm going to run to the window and throw down an under. But when you give me KD Davis, when you give me that UTEP defense, and also I'll say this, KD Davis pairing up with Phil Bennett, a DC who's, been a traveling salesman for years, but he has turned around some defenses, and he did it in short order. He took a unit that was in the hundreds for North Texas. They got into the 60s, 70s in most metrics. I think they're only going to be better this year. And one final plug for a potential G5 hero. I'll probably be back next week talking this guy up. Tom Trebe, a JUCO All-American. They end up signing this kid to anchor their defensive line on the edge. 25 tackles for loss last year. So I'm seeing a lot of negative plays for UTEP in this game, a lot of punting, and hopefully, a 23-17 kind of game. Cash my first ticket. What is your thought on this Conference USA battle to start week 0?
Yeah, I actually don't hate that at all. But because of a lot of what you said, my best bet this week, second best bet, actually comes from this game as well. I'm on North Texas. We talked about it in the preview show. I'm actually, I took a flyer in the Mean Green to win the conference. And as much as I love UTEP, I just like North Texas in this spot. I'm not as down on Austin Ani as you make it sound. He's back for his 5th season at North Texas. After 6 seasons in the Yankees organization, he'll be happily celebrating his 48th birthday next month. So happy birthday to Austin Ani. But even as old and experienced as him, I totally agree with we know what he is, because he didn't start the season as their quarterback. He didn't even take over as a starter until week 5. And if you look at him last year, in his first 3 games, they went 0-3, and he threw 6 interceptions. In the next 5 games, they went 5-0, and he threw 1 interception. He got much better as the season went on. Granted, they really started leaning on the run, which, I actually am still high on their running game. They have 3 freshman running backs last year that all scored 5 touchdowns. Ayo Adaye averaged 6.1 yards per carry, 3.7 yards after contact. They get Oscar Attaway back, who tore his ACL last spring. So they really have 4 really, really strong running backs. You mentioned it. 4 offensive line starters are back. They bring back the leading receiver, Roderick Burns. They get Jair Shorter back, who had a season-ending injury week 3. And for UTEP, yeah, they're really stout up front, but they have to replace both their corners. They have to replace both their safeties. And you mentioned it. They lose Jacob Cowan, first team all conference. They also lost Justin Herrick. They lost 70% of all their catches and yards last year. These two teams just played last November. This was one of the last games of the year. North Texas won that game 20-17. So if that happens again, we'll both win, which is fine with me. North Texas won on a game-winning field goal. But you look at that game, North Texas held AWAT to 85 yards on 17 carries, totally shut him down. You mentioned it. Katie Davis is a monster. And you look at how UTEP moved the ball. Cowing had 174 yards in a touchdown in that game. He was their whole offense that game and most of the year. He's gone. Burns, who's back, had 93 yards in a touchdown against UTEP. So I love the way North Texas, too, they come into this season. We mentioned it. Seth Luttrell's on the hot seat. They win their final 5 games, earn a bowl trip. They're flying high. They pretty much bring back most of their team. I actually think they're better this year than they were last year. UTEP lost 4 of their final 5, and I don't think they're as good as they were last year. So you tell me North Texas won by 3 last year. They're better. UTEP's worse, and now they're laying 1. I understand it's in UTEP, but laying 1 plus, depending on where you look, it's a little different each places. I like North Texas money line at -115. I think the Mean Green come out and they get this win.
I think you've convinced me, to be honest, kind of running through all those different elements. And this was a UTEP team that was top 20 in time of possession last year. They were 17th nationally, getting the ball, holding onto it, moving the chains. As I mentioned, an effective running game, but not one that, popped the big play. So how do they replace that? Is there an opportunity to work out any growing pains against a defense that could be pretty good by Conference USA standards? In my opinion, probably not. So I do think it would be interesting in a game parlay with North Texas on the money line as well as the under. I think that's one way to go about it. Of all my projections in week 0 and week 1, this was the furthest that was off in terms of the total, almost a full 8 points. So I think there's just too much value to pass up.